usually introduce bottles is two kind of separate ways, one being from the cylinder and one being from the bowl. You're all my students, so you know how to throw a cylinder and you know how to throw a bowl already. So with the cylinder, flat bottom, vertical wall, and this is like the easiest bottle I think to make, is you just throw a cylinder and we're going to only treat the top. And then we'll work into a cylinder and trying to have a little bit more defined at the neck. And then we'll get into starting a bowl shape at the bottom and having more of a belly at the base of the bottle, and then coming into a neck. So that I would think would be the more difficult, or what some people think is the more difficult version of a bottle. So we'll start simple, and simple one is first one, cylinders. Cylinders are easy to make, so I'm not going to go over any of the actual cylinder process because we should have that down by now. The easiest version would be something you're not going to trim, so you can go like 1/4 inch floor, try to get your 1/4 inch walls, that way you don't have to flip it upside down. It's like the easiest approach to a bottle. It's something that you don't have to flip upside down, but we'll navigate trimming bottles on Tuesday. Press, compress, compress. Okay, so my walls are even, all good. So now all I'm really worried about is bringing this in, actually creating a neck. And why I like to start off this way is because we all already know this shape already, and it shouldn't be too difficult to do this. So all we're going to really work on is collaring. You can do that a couple different ways. Some people are taught to have 6 points of contact. So fingers bent, touch at your fingers here, touch at your knuckles, and touch at your thumbs. And you approach the clay like this. I just wet my hands and collar the whole thing and just use my entire hands. So what I'm going to do is start maybe 1/3 the way down, somewhere right there, and all I'm going to do is put my hands around, constrict a little bit, and come up. So really wet. I got all the water out of the inside already because I don't want any water in there as I close it up. I won't get a sponge down there. So I'm going to go to that little mark, constrict just a little bit, move my hands up. I'm just going to do this in small increments, so that's pretty doable. Get a little bit of water. I can maybe come up a little higher now, constrict a little bit, move my hands up. So I'm just slowly tapering this in. Every time you collar something in like this, the wall ends up getting thicker and thicker, and it starts to ripple a little bit. So periodically, you're going to want to just do a really light pass and just throw that to recompress the walls together, and then you can just do a couple more of these collaring passes. If you leave it like that, that's still a bottle, but now it's just a matter of defining where the neck is, where the shoulder is, where the rim is. So I'll do that with my ribs, and I might just use this a little bit, support on the inside with my finger. If I just push my rib in a little bit and compress, it starts defining a neck. I can use my rib to smooth things out. One thing that's happening with this is this shoulder, it's kind of awkward. It's like stepping in and then going up and then stepping in. So if I want to define that a little better, I can take one of my sticks here, and while I still can reach, I can push out a little bit. That just lifts that shoulder up a little. So it's a way of combating if your fingers aren't long enough to get down in there. But just supporting with the inside. And using the rib to shape. You don't need to use the rib, but it helps define the form. Oh, But this is a fun, I think, or a good exercise when you're learning how to make a bottle. You're just trying to make a shelf at the top of a cylinder. I'm going to cut this little bit of extra down here away. And then you can mess around if you want the neck to be a little bit more narrow. So you squeeze that in a little bit. If you want to chop it to be level. If you don't like that little bit of a wobble. When you color things in, the tendency is for, if there's any discrepancy in thickness, it's going to translate to the rim wobbling up and down. So don't freak out, just cut it off and keep going. But now I just finished this to have whichever style of rim that you want, really. So it's nice and even. You can define it again with the rib. And this will just be done. I mean, you can go over to Aardvark and buy a little cork with a pump in it and just turn it into a lotion bottle. Soap bottle. They sell those. Or you can just put a couple flowers in it. But this would be your starting point.
She has a strong commitment to her local clientele. Contact very calmly up and said, "No, please don't send collectors to my studio or my stores."
Just trying to get this to be a cylinder again. But the challenge with tall things is just getting your arm out of the way. So you look at my inside hand, it's just going straight up. But what's really common when you're learning is your hand just tilts over. With small things, you just tilt it over. So you got to break that habit and try to go straight up. Get the water out of it. And this is about at finished thickness. And something I would start urging you all to do is, as you approach the finished thickness, you start throwing the shape that you're going for. So if I want this to get a little wider here, I can just let my hands get a little wider, and then I can ease off again and just finish the way up. So you're just shaping. This will be my last one. I'm going to cut this extra away. And I'm going to start the shaping process. So everything about the rim and the neck, or sorry, the shoulder and the neck is going to be true. But the thing is, the more volume you put into something, the more difficult it is to stress it to go back in. Like that shoulder always wants to collapse. So that's what you're battling. I'm going to use my rib to compress the outside. This is also going to help me shape it so I can go back out again.
We are very visually oriented.
And just slowly put that shoulder in. So this volume here, it's not a big difference compared to our cylinder, but just adding this little bit of roundness, what I do on top of it now is going to accentuate the volume that's right here. So, and now what I'm going to do is all those same steps for the neck on that one above this one. Since you're dealing with the curve, you just have to be a little more careful. Wet hands again. Make sure your pot's wet. And I'm just going to be really gentle now. I'm going to squeeze in just a little bit. And move my hands up. It's also a recentering technique, so if you ever have any crazy wobbles, if you approach it this way, just slowly constrict and move up, you can actually get everything back close enough. My hands up. So now it's starting to articulate. You can see now this seems like it's a little bit more volume. I'm going to have my hands on the inside, and I'm just going to push over the top of my fingers and go in So I'm just following that same curve to make the shoulder now. So now I've got a really thick neck right here. And that's actually gonna allow for me to throw this to have a more finished neck and rim.
I think my work has changed a lot over time, although I think.
Now I'll just throw this like a little baby cylinder.
And because we're using a 1-to-1 medium of cloth to represent cloth.
So, oops. It's going to be about done. But then this one's good to go. And then the last one I'm going to make. And this one I'm anticipating trimming, so I'm going to actually leave it thick on purpose. Nice tall foot, so probably like a 1/2 inch thick at the bottom. And if we remember bowls, as you open, let your hand just drift up. So you have this nice round interior. Try to compress this as much as I can. And then just like cylinders, I'm going to recenter it. And just like bowls, I'm going to make sure that I don't disturb that interior curve as I'm drawing the clay. So if I want this to be narrow, this is another trick for taller forms. You just collar it in before you do another pass. So I'm going to pretty aggressively collar this up and in. So I'm trying to maintain that cone shape going up. And this will help you prevent making just another bowl. It's really common. But I'm focusing on height right now. I'm not focusing on shape. Just getting an even wall and concentrating on keeping that bottom round. As far as I'm going to take this, so I don't collapse it on me. Okay, I try to keep this little lump in my fingers, and just as long as you're moving up, you'll be okay. If you stop, it'll collapse in your hand. But it's a good practice for getting this arm out of your way. Okay, so I'm good to go here. I'm going to take off a little bit of extra. And I'm just going to start the shaping process. So I'm going to start the bottom as a belly and then have like a tall neck on it. So just like a bowl, I'm going to start bringing this out. And I'm going to slowly start easing off. But now like this whole bottom, I'm trying to finish the bottom thinking of what I could do with the top. But since I have more clay, I get to have a bigger neck now. So now it's all the same process again. I get to work above that shoulder. Slowly close this in. While I could still get my hand, I might want to eliminate that lump because right here it's like a really common spot for that to drop in. So maybe I'll use my hand and just smooth it out and compress it. Just doing like the slightest little dance on me. Got a little jiggle. Okay, so now let's see. feeling the wall. And I'm gonna just slowly start pushing this in. I'm trying to maintain like a nice smooth curve here. Collar in again. Maybe do another really light pull. So I'm going to do these light.
Coming soon to craft the connection between artistry and industry.
I don't know. These things are always pretty goofy looking.
While dramatically reproducing old techniques.
So these are called chucks. They're bisque, little hourglass shaped. They're meant so that a narrow bottle can go in there, and then that this will hold the shoulder. But the first thing we do. How's our tap centering coming?
I will never turn a bottle on.
Cool. We getting the practice? Liars. A little bit? Okay, so I have a level to make life easy. So I'm gonna level it one direction, spin it 90 degrees. Hey, it's level. Sweet. So I like to get the pot level on the bottom. This one, remember it was a cylinder, so it doesn't really need to be trimmed much. I'm just gonna tidy it up. But as long as you can level something, and if you've been practicing your tap centering, it makes life so much easier, right? So I'm gonna get that towards the middle. Typically, to make this work a little better, I didn't do it, of course, because who knows why. But it's a nice idea that since these are bisqued, to soak them in water. If you soak them in water for a little bit, your clay sticks better. You'll see right now as I put my clay on, it's gonna stick for a little bit and then it'll release. So, chunks of clay. I'm gonna attach the chuck to the wheel. There goes that. And then I'm gonna make a really thin coil, and I'm gonna put that in there so that this doesn't move around too much. So I'll stick this down in this gap, and with some pressure, just get that to seal. See how it just pops right out? Because it's not wet. But it'll at least hold it in place for now. You won't be able to do this on all bottles, but any bottle that you can do it on, go ahead and make sure. It'll keep the bottle from tilting side to side as you trim. And then now, some of us, I've showed you some of you, but if your pot's too dry, you can just take a damp sponge and wet the surface. And then I just wait for that glossy, like the wet water to go away. And then as soon as it gets matte, then you can start trimming again. So I'm not really concerned about taking weight off. I'm just neatening up the bottom. Really sharp tools. You can actually trim really dry clay, and that's why I'm able to do this. So I'm just going to try to get that cut so that it's a nice, smooth, straight wall. And then this should be done, because if you remember, I threw the bottom to finish thickness.
Oh my god.
So it really shouldn't take much. This is like a cosmetic trim job. It's not really a... I'm not reducing too much weight. So that's good. Bevel my edge. Practice chattering again. I would just be doing that way because I didn't need to trim much. So remember, that was the easy bottle. Canvas. Remember this goofy thing?
I like that.
So this one, if you're, I threw this one like a bowl on the bottom, so it's really heavy. So it needs to have like a tall trimmed foot now. And then this should actually need some trimming in, similar to a bowl. The only real way to know the thickness is to be aware of it when you're throwing it for the bottom, the floor. So I threw that, I remember it was a 1/2 inch thick in the center, and if it keeps all the properties of a bowl, it should progressively go up. So as I trim, I should be able to go deeper and deeper towards the outside. So if I got a 1/2 inch in the middle, that means a 1/2 inch, a 1/4 inch in the center that I'm allowed to take away, and then just a little bit more as I go out from there. And I'm guessing I got to trim to like somewhere in there. So I can still do all my marks. Like, do I want my foot right there? Just give me some guidelines. So this one actually holds it pretty well, but it's sketchy. We'll deal with it. I just use bigger pieces of clay. Stop centering it, Sean. It's a handy tool. So I'm just going to use big lugs to really make sure this stays down. Okay, so now it's just trimming. I'll make my line.
Really nice, like layers, like birds, like perfectly,
Yeah. You tell some pretty sweet stories of their work. Nothing's changing. I'm going a little slower than I might normally go, just so I don't disturb too much of this. But other than that, it's just another foot on another pot. Getting like these perfect little ringlets off of here. And some people, honestly, they won't rely on chuck. Sometimes they'll just throw a really thick cylinder, dry off the surface a little bit, maybe hit it with a torch, and then just stick their bottle down into it, fresh on the wheel. That's a way of doing it too. So if you don't have a bat at home, or if you don't have a bunch of these chucks ready-made, you can just make a big, thick cylinder, shove your pot in it.
So you're gonna bring it all the way down to that line?
Yeah, that's just my gauge for how this pot probably blows this curve in. See how it comes back out?
Yeah.
So I probably need to get all that off. I did let this dry quite a bit. It's not trimming super fast. Using an actual level helps. If you try to do it by eye, that's where it gets frustrating. And then being able to tap center helps because then it just speeds up the process. So that's why I'm going to keep encouraging you to get your little soup can and do as much practicing as you can. Alright, so remember, my foot needs to be, I would say, somewhere around that tall. I could choose to make it like really distinct and, you know, have a sharp corner down there, but I'm gonna just go for a smooth foot instead, smooth outside. So one thing I'm being aware of is just my touch with the tools. I'm not like trying to press super hard. Just because this particular thing just wants to fall all over the place. Your ribs make really good smoothing tools. Like it really does give you a cleaner line than your trimming tool's ever going to give you. Do you remember when we're trimming to go middle first to the depth that you know you can cut down? So if I go my half or a quarter inch here, I should be able to go at least that on the outside. So I like getting those two distances first and then take away this whole patty on the top. So this is slowly starting to wobble because I'm just putting more pressure on. The hopes of speeding this along.
Don't you put more clay on the bottom?
Still needs some trimming. I'll keep doing that. I'll probably shave off some more along the bottom here. Don't know what you'd use it for. Goofy.